Ladies and gentlemen, certainly, here's a powerful Shi Heng Yi style introduction for your motivational speech titled, Watch Before June 25, 2025. Shi Heng Yi explains God's final warning, intro Shi Heng Yi style. Before we begin, I ask you to sit still. Breathe in, breathe out. For the next few minutes, leave behind the noise of the outside world. The world is full of movement, constant distraction, but wisdom comes only when we are still, present. There is a reason you are here. Not by chance, but by alignment, by something greater pulling your attention to this moment. The world is changing, time is moving fast, and in this speed we forget what is essential. We forget to ask, what is my purpose? What am I here to do before the clock runs out? Today's message is not just a reflection. It is a warning, a final one. Before June 25th, 2025, there is something you must awaken to. Not because I say so, but because your soul already knows it. You feel it, the pressure building, the signs becoming clearer, the silence within calling louder. This is not fear mongering, it is truth speaking. And truth does not come with comfort, it comes with clarity. Just as the wind shapes the mountain and fire purifies gold, this message is meant to transform, to burn away your illusions and reveal what is real. What I share with you is not religion, it is alignment, not dogma, it is awakening, it is a path walked in discipline, awareness, and connection to something greater, what some call God, what others call energy, spirit, Tao. The name is not important. What matters is your response. This is not a time for waiting. This is a time for acting with awareness, a time to confront your habits, your distractions, your sleepwalking. Because the moment is now, and the final warning has already begun, will you listen? Now let us begin. In today's world, most people live in a state of continuous outward focus, pursuing success, chasing distractions, reacting to situations. But beneath the noise, a subtle call is always present, a call to awaken. This awakening is not just spiritual, it is a return to clarity, presence, and purpose. The urgency of this awakening grows stronger as the world drifts further into chaos. The storms we see outside, climate crisis, wars, moral collapse, confusion in identity are only reflections of storms brewing within. Before any external collapse, there is always an internal one. When people disconnect from their inner guidance, when they abandon silence, when they numb themselves with endless consumption, the collapse begins silently, unnoticed. By the time it becomes visible, it is often too late to reverse. God's final warning is not necessarily a voice from the sky or a vision in the clouds. It is the accumulation of ignored signs, the echo of neglected truth. It manifests through discomfort, pain, repeated patterns, moments of quiet desperation. It is the whisper behind your anxiety, the stillness between your thoughts, the nudge that you often dismiss. Every missed opportunity to pause, reflect, and align is a moment closer to that collapse. What makes this warning final is not because time has ended, but because the soul reaches a threshold where continuing in sleep becomes unbearable. The urgency lies in reclaiming our responsibility to be conscious. To be awake is to see clearly your actions, your motivations, your distractions, your patterns. This kind of awareness is not passive, it demands discipline. It requires daily cultivation. To awaken means to no longer seek answers outside, but to realize everything you need is already within. The problem is not that the truth is hidden. The problem is that most are too distracted to look. In a society built on urgency, busyness, and shallow connections, inner awakening becomes an act of rebellion. It is saying no to superficiality. It is saying yes to introspection, to simplicity, to truth. Many people wait for a big moment to change, a health crisis, a financial loss, a death. But awakening doesn't have to wait for tragedy. It can begin now. It begins with stillness, with observation, with one conscious breath. The world is changing rapidly. Technology is accelerating human disconnection. Truth is being diluted. Attention is constantly hijacked. But in the midst of this, there are still moments, brief, silent moments, where the soul tries to speak. Most people ignore it. They say they are too busy, but busyness is not the problem, avoidance is. This warning is not about fear. It is about alignment. It is about remembering who you truly are before the world told you who to be. God's final warning is the last gentle reminder before life brings the hard lesson. You can ignore the signs only for so long, but the law of nature is precise. What you plant is what you harvest. If you plant ignorance, you harvest suffering. If you plant mindfulness, you harvest peace. But the seeds must be planted now, not tomorrow, not when things get better, not when you feel ready. The clock does not stop ticking because you are hesitant. The outer world may collapse. Systems may fall. Structures may dissolve, but the question is, will your inner world stand strong when it happens? If you have not built your foundation on awareness, presence, and spiritual discipline, then external collapse will shake you to your core. But if your inner temple is strong, then even when the world burns, you will remain centered. This is the urgency of awakening. It is not spiritual luxury, it is spiritual necessity. Every single day, the divine communicates. Not always in grand gestures, not through miracles that shake the earth, but through quiet signals buried within ordinary life. Most people are waiting for a dramatic sign from the sky to know that God is speaking, that the universe is trying to get their attention. But the truth is, these signs are already present, woven into your day, disguised as moments you usually dismiss. A delay in your plans, a repeated number you keep seeing, a feeling of deep unease when doing something you know isn't right, or even a person crossing your path with a message you needed to hear. These are not coincidences. They are part of a divine language that requires presence to understand. Modern life is designed to distract. With every swipe, every notification, every rush to meet expectations, we move further away from our natural state of awareness. And in this state of unconscious living, we fail to recognize the sacred in the simple. The sunrise that calls you to start anew, the silence that invites reflection, the breath that connects you back to the present. Each of these holds messages that guide you. But without attention, they go unnoticed. Just like a radio has to be tuned to the right frequency to receive a signal, your mind and heart must be aligned to perceive divine guidance. Otherwise, you will only see random events, meaningless chaos, and miss the underlying order pointing you toward your truth. There's a reason you keep encountering the same challenges, the same emotional patterns, the same types of people who trigger your growth. These are not punishments, they are lessons, repeated not because God is angry, but because you haven't yet learned what is being offered. Divine warnings are often subtle at first, a whisper, a discomfort, a shift in energy. When ignored, they become louder, conflict, loss, breakdown, but the purpose is always the same, to realign you with your path, to bring you back to your center, back to your integrity, back to the truth that has always been inside you. The problem is that the world trains you to look outward for answers. It conditions you to numb discomfort rather than explore it, to silence your intuition in favor of logic, to chase success instead of meaning. But divine signs often come through the very things we try to avoid: uncertainty, stillness, pain, change. The mind resists, but the soul knows, and that knowing becomes louder the more we listen. The more we pay attention to the patterns, to the feelings beneath the surface, to the inner voice we often suppress, the more we understand what the universe is trying to reveal. Every spiritual tradition speaks of this inner guidance. this connection to the divine that transcends religion and doctrine. It's not something external you have to find, it's something internal you must remember. But remembering requires effort. It requires the willingness to be uncomfortable, to question, to slow down, to see beyond the surface. It means understanding that what you call coincidence may be divine precision. What you call a setback may be sacred redirection. What you call loss may be a deeper lesson in trust. But all of this requires the eyes to see and the heart to feel. In every moment, life is asking you, are you awake? Are you present enough to notice what's being revealed? Are you humble enough to receive the message, even if it doesn't come the way you expected? The divine does not need to shout, it only needs you to be still. Because in that stillness, the signs become clear, the direction becomes obvious, and the warning becomes a gift. Discipline is not a restriction, it is a structure. It is the foundation that holds your life steady when everything around you begins to shift. Without discipline, the mind becomes chaotic, emotions take over, and the path becomes blurred. But when you live with discipline, you create clarity, not just in what you do, but in who you are. Most people associate discipline with external routines, waking up early, working hard, staying fit. But true discipline begins inside. It starts with your thoughts, your intentions, your ability to say no to distraction and yes to growth. Discipline is the bridge between where you are and where you are meant to be. In a world full of stimulation and temptation, discipline becomes a rare and powerful act of rebellion. It means choosing silence over noise, presence over panic, consistency over comfort. It means showing up even when you don't feel like it, and that choice, made repeatedly, forges a path toward clarity. Every great transformation in life is rooted in discipline. The monk sitting in stillness, the athlete rising at dawn, the teacher perfecting their craft, all of them share one common thread: the willingness to do what is necessary again and again until the mind aligns with the purpose. Clarity does not come by accident, it is the result of committed focus. When the body is trained, the breath controlled, the mind observed, a space opens up inside. In that space you begin to hear something deeper, a voice that is not clouded by desire, fear, or ego. That is where clarity lives, but to reach that space, you must pass through resistance. The resistance of the body that wants comfort, the mind that wants novelty, the ego that seeks approval. Discipline is the sword that cuts through this resistance, moment by moment, choice by choice. Most people wait for motivation to act. They wait to feel inspired before they move, but motivation is temporary. Discipline is permanent. It does not ask how you feel, it asks who you are becoming, and each act of discipline is a declaration of identity. When you rise before the sun and sit in silence, you are declaring that your spirit is more important than your schedule. When you choose to reflect rather than react, you are affirming that peace matters more than pride. This is how you build the bridge from chaos to clarity, not in one grand gesture, but in 1,000 quiet decisions. Life will test your discipline. Distractions will come dressed as opportunities. Comfort will whisper its promises. And in those moments, it is your training that decides your direction. If you have built a disciplined mind, you will not be easily moved. You will see through illusion. You will recognize the cost of distraction, and you will return to your path. That path may be narrow, it may be steep, but it is the only path that leads to true freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be who you truly are without interference from the false self. In times of uncertainty, discipline becomes your compass. When you don't know what the future holds, you return to what you can control. Your breath, your effort, your attitude. These small acts are not small at all. They are the anchors that keep you grounded, and from that grounded state, clarity emerges. You no longer need to chase purpose. because purpose begins to reveal itself in your disciplined presence. You no longer need to escape reality, because you have trained yourself to meet it with strength and stillness. This is the hidden gift of discipline. It not only prepares you for the storm, it reveals that the storm was never outside, but always within. The ego is a mask crafted over years, shaped by opinions, reinforced by fears, and fueled by comparison. It is not who you are, but who you've been told to be. From childhood, you are given labels, identities, expectations. You are praised for certain behaviors, punished for others. Slowly, a false self begins to form, a version of you that exists not to express truth, but to earn approval. The ego thrives in control, in image, in separation. It wants to be right, admired, validated, but in this pursuit, the true voice within is buried. The voice of the soul, quiet, honest, unshaken, gets drowned out by the noise of performance. Letting go of ego is not easy. It means unraveling stories you've told yourself for years. It means admitting that some of what you believed about yourself was never really yours. It was absorbed, inherited, imitated. The ego fears this unraveling because its survival depends on attachment to identity. But the soul seeks liberation, and liberation begins with surrender, the willingness to step beyond who you think you are and listen for something deeper. This process isn't dramatic, it's subtle. It's felt in moments when you stop defending yourself, when you stop needing to be seen as right, when you listen instead of react. In those moments, the ego weakens and the inner voice becomes clearer. That voice within has always been there, waiting patiently beneath layers of noise. It is the source of your intuition, your wisdom, your peace. It doesn't shout, it doesn't compete. It simply waits for stillness, for humility, for attention. But most people are too busy being somebody to hear it. They are building empires of identity, chasing validation, trying to control how they are perceived. And in doing so, they lose touch with who they are without the labels. The moment you begin to ask, "Who am I without all of this?" the ego trembles, because that question threatens its illusion. Yet that is the question that leads you back to the voice that never lied to you. Letting go of ego is not about rejecting yourself. It's about returning to your authentic self. It's peeling away the layers that don't belong so that what's real can emerge. That emergence often feels uncomfortable. You might feel lost, uncertain, exposed. But that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that truth is being uncovered. When you no longer need to impress, you begin to express. When you no longer cling to being special, you begin to experience the sacred, and in that sacred space, your inner voice speaks with power, not volume. The ego wants certainty, it wants to know, but the voice within is more interested in being aligned than being certain. It guides you through feeling, presence, and awareness. It does not always make sense to the logical mind, but it always resonates with the heart. This is why ego must be set aside, not because it is evil, but because it is loud. Too loud to hear the truth beneath, and the truth is not outside you. It is not in the books, the systems, or the gurus. It is already within, waiting for the silence that follows surrender. The process of letting go of ego is ongoing. It is not something you do once, it is something you practice daily. Each time you choose to pause before reacting, each time you choose humility over pride, each time you admit you don't know and choose to listen instead, you are loosening the grip of ego. In that loosened grip, space opens up, space for clarity, for connection, for truth, and in that space, the voice within finally has room to speak. It will not flatter you, it will not inflate you, but it will guide you to what is real, what is necessary, what is sacred. It will guide you home to yourself, not the self that was built, but the self that has always been silently watching. Nature does not rush, yet everything is accomplished. The river flows, the tree grows, the sun rises and sets, all in perfect rhythm. There is no stress, no anxiety, no comparison. Everything in nature is aligned with a cycle, a pattern, a deeper intelligence, but human beings have moved far from this natural rhythm. The modern world operates on artificial time, pushing faster, louder, and more relentlessly every day. In this chase, people forget that they, too, are a part of nature. They forget that their mind, body, and spirit were never designed to function in constant acceleration. The more they disconnect from nature's rhythm, the more they fall into illusions, illusions of control, of success, of permanence. When you observe nature closely, you begin to understand presence. A bird does not fear the future. A flower does not regret the past. Everything in nature exists fully in the now. This presence holds power. It is in the now that truth is felt, clarity arises, and healing begins. But in the world of humans, presence has been replaced by productivity. Rest is seen as laziness, stillness mistaken for weakness, and so people keep running, unaware that they are running away from themselves. They chase the next achievement, the next distraction, the next escape. In doing so, they create an artificial world, one that looks impressive but feels empty. Aligning with nature's rhythm is about returning to simplicity. It is about listening to your body when it asks for rest. It is about rising with the sun, eating when you are truly hungry, speaking only when the words are rooted in awareness. It is not a rule, it is a remembering, remembering that life is not a race to the end. It is a dance of moments. Nature does not bloom all year. It has seasons. Seasons of growth, seasons of stillness, seasons of death and renewal. The human spirit, too, needs its seasons. But when people resist these seasons, when they try to force growth during winter or stay silent during spring, suffering begins. The suffering is not punishment, it is a signal that you have stepped out of alignment. Man-made illusions are everywhere. The illusion that your worth is based on your output. The illusion that more is always better. The illusion that happiness lies in what you can possess. These illusions blind the spirit. They make you believe that peace is something you need to earn rather than something you already are. But when you step outside, when you breathe with the earth, when you listen to the silence between the trees, you remember what is real. You remember that everything you need is already inside you, that clarity, peace, and purpose do not come from force, but from flow. This flow cannot be faked. It requires surrender. It requires slowing down enough to notice the signs, to feel the energy, to trust the pace. Trusting that rest is part of growth. Trusting that endings are necessary for beginnings. Trusting that your journey has its own timing and that forcing it will only lead to frustration. The mind wants speed, but the soul wants rhythm. And when you honor that rhythm, life begins to feel different, more grounded, more real, more connected. Technology and artificial environments have pulled people into a virtual existence where screens replace sunlight and connection is measured in likes instead of presence. But no matter how advanced the world becomes, the soul will always crave the natural. The wind, the soil, the sound of water, the warmth of fire, these elements awaken something ancient within. They remind you that before the titles, before the pressure, before the identity, you were part of something whole. That wholeness is not something to find, but something to return to, not through force, but through alignment. Through the quiet decision to let go of the man, made rush and return to the timeless rhythm of life itself. Fear is a natural emotion. It arises when we face the unknown, when something beyond our control begins to unfold. But most people allow fear to become their prison rather than their teacher. They avoid what they don't understand. They resist change. They cling to what feels familiar even if it keeps them small. Yet fear, when met with awareness, has the potential to transform. It becomes not an enemy but a guide. It points to where growth is waiting. The unknown is not something to run from. It is the field where possibility is born. But to enter that field, you must move with presence, not panic. The key is in how you respond to fear. Most react, they hide, they delay, they escape. But the one who trains the mind, who observes without judgment, begins to act instead of react. That shift is the beginning of power. Because fear no longer controls your direction, it becomes part of your fuel. The unknown is always present. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Control is always an illusion, but awareness is your anchor. When you are grounded in awareness, you no longer wait for certainty to act. You act with clarity, even in uncertainty. You don't need to know the outcome to take the next step. You just need to be present in the moment and faithful to your path. Mindful action is not loud, it does not rush. It moves with purpose, not pressure. When fear arises, it asks, what is needed now, not what is safe, not what is easy, but what is true. Most people live from reaction, pushed and pulled by circumstances, consumed by what if. But the one who lives from mindfulness listens deeper. They do not avoid the unknown. They meet it with steady breath, with open heart, with grounded presence. They walk into the darkness not because they are fearless, but because they are aware. And in that awareness, the darkness loses its grip. This is the transformation, when fear turns into a doorway, when the unknown becomes a mirror showing you your inner strength. Action taken in fear leads to confusion. But action taken in mindfulness leads to growth. It doesn't mean you won't fall. It doesn't mean things will always go your way. But it means you will face life directly, with honesty and integrity. You will not betray yourself just to feel safe. You will not trade truth for comfort. That is the courage mindfulness brings, not the absence of fear, but the decision to rise above it. In a world filled with distractions, fear is often hidden. It hides behind overworking, behind perfectionism, behind needing to be in control. But when you become still enough, you can see it, you can name it, and by naming it, you remove its power. Then you begin to act, not from impulse, not from habit, but from awareness. That awareness turns every decision into a sacred act. Every step becomes a choice rooted in truth, not fear. You no longer chase certainty. You create clarity by showing up fully in each moment with attention and intention. This is how transformation happens. Not through force, not through escape, but through presence. By meeting fear with awareness and moving forward with steady breath, you begin to embody your strength. You realize that the unknown is not the enemy, it is the path. The only question is how you will walk it, with resistance or with grace, with panic or with presence. The one who transforms fear into mindful action becomes unshakable, because no matter what comes, they are no longer hiding. They are no longer running, they are choosing to face life as it is and respond with all that they are. That is the path of the awakened one, not fearless, but deeply aware, deeply rooted, and fully alive.